Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2017 Horace M. Albright Lecture in Conservation with Rose Marcario. I'm Keith Gillis. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the Dean of the College of Natural Resources and a professor of forest economics. And so before we begin, let me just clear off the housekeeping details. Please refrain from photography or recording during the event. We are recording the event, and it'll be available on the website for now and until the end of web recording. So if you missed something and you want to go back and get those words right, it'll be up on the web. There'll be time at the end of the lecture for questions, and you'll find index cards and pencils scattered about. And please write your question, pass it to the end of the aisle, and we'll have people running around picking up your cards. And please remember that the probability that your question will be asked is directly proportional to its legibility and its conciseness. Anyway, please, we want to get as many questions in as we can tonight at the end of the discussion. Take a moment, turn off cell phones. Technology's great when it's quiet. And thanks, I see people actually did it. I always love it when people follow instructions. So thanks for doing that. So on to the real part of the evening. The Horace M. Albright series at the College of Natural Resources has been going strong for over 50 years. And today it continues to be a wonderful tribute to Horace Albright's achievements. And I do want to give one shout out that wasn't planned. Larry Ruth is back there, who ran this series for us for a while. Hey, Larry, you did a great job. We'll talk after. So we're honored to have the opportunity to use this for the public good, to foster a dialogue on the critical issues facing our society. I'm very proud to say that the Albright Lecture Series has brought to Berkeley a veritable who's who of the most thought-provoking and innovative thought leaders in conservation over its history. And I think that the lecture you're going to hear tonight aligns perfectly with that tradition and spirit. So this year, the Albright Lecture is being presented through a partnership of the College of Natural Resources and the Haas Business School and their Center for Responsible Business. And to Dr. Robert Strand, my colleague and friend from the business school, who will be up here on the stage with Rose tonight to discuss her thoughts on activism and business. I'll add that his eyes got very wide when I just told him I'm the chair of the search committee for the next dean of Haas, which apparently that news hadn't gotten out to the business school yet. Now it has. Robert's the executive director of Center for Responsible Business. He's a member of the faculty at the Haas School, where he teaches the MBA curriculum in sustainability and corporate social responsibility. He's standing down here. You'll recognize him when I bring him up to the stage with Rose in just a minute. Now, let me move to introducing our distinguished speaker. The achievements and lifetime work of our guest speaker tonight are really quite remarkable. She is the CEO and president of Patagonia Works and Patagonia Inc., companies owned by the iconoclastic founder Yvon Chouinard. Since Rose's tenure at Patagonia began in 2008, she's credited with quadrupling the company's profits and revenues and taking the founder's radical vision to scale. Rose created the company's first in-house venture fund, oversaw the development and creation of Patagonia Provisions, an organic regenerative food company focused on applying Patagonia's mission to the food supply chain. In 2012, Patagonia was certified as California's first for-profit benefit corporation, a structure that I've been quite interested in recent years, confirming that the company follows rigorous standards for social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. For her efforts, Ms. Marcario has achieved very high accolades, among them President Obama honoring her at the White House as a champion of change for her family-friendly work policies. Lost my last page of notes. There we go. She was profiled in Fortune magazine's Most Powerful Women in Business in 2015, named as one of the most creative and innovative CEOs of 2016 by Fast Company. GoodNet named Rose as one of the 5 most inspiring CEOs in America. That's really quite a statement. In 2015, Upworthy named her one of the 9 high-profile CEOs who did positive things for the world. It's my distinct honor to welcome our spring 2017 Albright speaker, Rose Marcario. Please join me in welcoming her and Robert up to the stage.
Thank you, Dean, very much. Rose,
Robert.
you are at home here in Berkeley. So Rose, welcome to Berkeley, and also to many of our guests here. Welcome to the University of California, Berkeley. We've got a large group of folks right here that are coming from universities across the US and are very excited about, I'm sure collectively, everyone in this room is, about to have a conversation with you, Rose. So welcome very much.
Thank you, Robert. It's wonderful to be here. It's great to see everybody, and we're looking forward to our case challenge tomorrow.
I would like to just pose a few questions, and you will also, as Dean Gillis said, you will have time to ask some questions yourselves too. But what I'd like to start out with, Rose, if I could, is just tell us just a bit about Patagonia. Who is Patagonia? And also, if you would mind offering a few comments about yourself and how you came to be in this role as CEO of this incredibly iconic company.
Yeah, so I recommend that everybody read Let My People Go Surfing, because that has the full story of Yvon Chouinard and the company. And he just updated it this last year for the 10th anniversary edition. It's really great. It's got all the sort of update on what we're doing with agriculture, and it's a great read. But basically, Yvon left Maine and came to California, Southern California, and what he describes as a grapes of wrath sort of move with his parents. And he started, just having a life outside. He always was attracted to the outdoors, coming from Maine, and he got into falconry, and then he, through that, got into climbing and all kinds of other outdoor sports, surfing, kayaking, every outdoor sport imaginable. And he taught himself how to be a blacksmith, and he started making pitons, so hard goods for the outdoor industry. And that's basically how his company got a start. And then that company morphed in 1973 into an apparel company, an outdoor apparel and gear company called Patagonia, which was named after a region that he visited and did some first ascents at. So he started as an alpinist, and it's interesting, all those guys, Doug and Tompkins and Yvon, they never cared about doing something because of any economic benefit, They were just having fun. They used to call themselves the conquerors of the useless, which I thought was sort of great. And
also very reluctant businessman.
Yeah,
also too,
but that kind of evolved, and I think his sort of, because he was so connected to the natural world in all the sports that he did, you saw the degradation of the natural world, over time. And then as a businessman, he didn't really like being a businessman. He never really had respect for businessmen. He thought of them as grease balls. So he sort of, he didn't want to be your average businessman. And I think the combination of seeing this degradation of the natural world and wild places that he loved so much really motivated him to make Patagonia a responsible company, and that includes responsibility around environmental issues and social issues. And the company's had a lot of firsts, like going 100% organic 20 years ago, and recycled polyester, and just sharing innovations with the industry, which was not common at that time. So I think that's sort of the story of Patagonia. Fast forward 44 years later, he's still the primary shareholder, he and his family. It is, I think, the most inspirational company, I think, in the world. And
You're not alone in thinking that, by the way.
and so I think in terms of being a model for how business can and should be done, I think, it really falls into that category. I came to Patagonia from my own sort of disillusionment with the corporate world. And, I was at a pretty young age, moved up the finance ladder and ended up CFO of a public company. And, just saw this sort of short-termism of, the quarterly profit grind and, transactional finance where, investors want to sell companies off after 5 years and blow the whole thing up, and people lose jobs and lose management. And to me, it wasn't something I wanted to participate anymore, but I didn't know what else to do. So I took some time off, and I went on a meditation retreat because I was studying Buddhism at the time, and I came back and I heard about Yvon looking for a CFO, and so I went to meet him, and that's how I ended up at Patagonia. And fast forward now 9 years, I was a CFO, and then I became the COO, and now I'm the CEO. So.
And there's a lot in that story there with Patagonia, and then also yourself,
Yeah.
Rose. And I would like to focus a little more squarely on yourself, although it's certainly born from the roots of Patagonia, and that really getting to what this title of tonight's talk is, activism in business. And I've heard you speak, and so many of us have heard you speak so often about the need for activism. And for many of us, you hear activism and you inherently think anti-business. But you speak so much about the need for activism in business. And could you explain, what do you mean by this, and expand upon that for us?
Well, I think activism, Yvon would always say, the company we do what we do, and we get sort of noticed for doing it. But what we're doing is just balancing both being a business and actually caring about people and the planet. And it's a balancing act, but it's what we do. One of the things that was really important to them around conservation of wilderness is activism, because most of that kind of work happens at the grassroots activist level. So our founders wanted to invest in grassroots activism. They felt that's where the real work of preserving the environment and conserving the environment was happening. So they started doing really small grants and funding grassroots activism, which was actually a very brave thing for a corporation to do, because most people don't like to mix corporations with grassroots activism. But they were pretty bold, and they did it, and they didn't really care whether they lost customers as a result or didn't, and they just went for it. And that's always been part of the company. It's a big pillar. Since at the end of this fiscal year, in total for that program, we'll have given $84 million to grassroots activism since the inception of that program. And those are really small grants. Those are like $10,000 to $20,000 grants to people who are chaining themselves to trees or protecting a riverbed or something like that. It's really impactful. So not every company is going to be comfortable doing that, but I think it's really clear, right, that business is amazing, but it's also ruining the natural world and destroying the planet. So we need to have a new model of business that considers people and the planet and profit. And Patagonia has been around 44 years. The last almost 10 years that I've been there, we are just as competitive as our public competitors. In fact, we're in the top tier of our public competitors, and we're doing all of this stuff, right? So it is possible, but I think it's really hard in the current public structure. So I think companies need to be brave. They need to look at their own supply chains. They need to look at their own ways in which they impact the environment, the planet, people's lives, and they need to act. I mean, we really don't have another 30 years to sit around and think about whether we can act anymore. I mean, that time has come and gone. So I think anybody who really, business can be an incredible tool for positive change in the world. It is the only thing that will really move the meter, I think. And it's possible. And there's lots there that can help to do that through the benefit corporation movement, through public pressure and activism. It's powerful. Look at how much activism has affected the world in just the last 4 months. It's unbelievable.
So could you speak a little bit more then within the company, this balancing of ecological responsibility with profitability? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think because everyone at our company shares these values. So it's not like you're trying to convince anybody that,
Well, I mean, you're a former CFO. Oftentimes you're trying to convince the person in the CFO seat. So
yeah. I mean, Yvonne has said this, and I have actually found it to be true, which is any time that we do something good for the environment, we make more money. And Ray Anderson actually at Interface said the same thing. I mean, when he started to green his supply chain, he said his business almost was up by something like 75%, and his profit was up by a significant factor. So I think what that says is that customers want to be responsible and buy responsibly too. And the companies that are focused on meeting that customer need, because we all want to do what's right as much as we possibly can in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I'd highlight in there too, I think, as is testament, let me just use this sample size right here. The students are participating in the case competition. Some of our brightest students from across the United States. Show of hands, who would be interested in working with Patagonia in the future? Just quick show of hands. Okay, that's interesting. So it strikes me as your capacity to draw and select the very best talent.
Yeah.
I would argue probably, and you've got a number of Patagonia employees with whom I've had the privilege of getting to know, and I know you've got great people.
Yeah.
It strikes me as that's probably another major part of that profitability equation, is the talent.
I mean, I think we have a really engaged, workforce, and I think the reason that we do is we all feel this urgent need to solve this problem, and it's urgent. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody works with that kind of conviction, and they do it with, with a lot of fun and joy and, intensity. And everyone at every level of the company, I would say. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
Rose, if I could just shift just slightly here, and this is focusing, I would like to ask a question specifically about your role as a very prominent business leader. What do you see as your responsibility, perhaps your opportunity, with respect to policy? And I'm talking about environmental, social policy. Mm-hmm. Do you have a role? Do you have a responsibility? And do other business leaders have a responsibility when it comes to policy issues?
Well, I think we've seen a lot of engagement from the business world in the last, I want to say really in the last decade, but especially in the last 5 years, around climate, mm-hmm. around divesting of fossil fuels, around pushing for renewables, around, we've seen business kind of step up, and not just the quirky kind of companies, but big companies that have a big impact. And I think that's been incredibly heartening to me to see that. I think we need to do, and I think of part of what I need to do now in the next few years is really build more coalitions among our own industry, outside of our industry, work across industries to solve problems. And I feel pretty emboldened now to do that, and I try to do that whenever I can now. And I think we all have the intellectual capability to solve these problems. But there's been, because of the way I think the public markets work, there's been this sort of push for short-termism that's done nothing but actually hurt people and hurt the planet in the long term. If you think that you're only serving the interests of the financial shareholder, then it's game over. You know, it's like we see where that's going to go. I think all of us see where that will go. And I think that's why these new models and new structures like the benefit corporation are coming together. And I think, you know, I see a real movement happening in business where people are starting to understand it. It's not just because of what they're hearing in their boardroom, but it's because of what they're hearing from their employees. And it's what they're hearing from their customers. You know, when I talk to other CEOs, I'll say, I just got creamed on social media by my employees. You know, and it's like, it means something to them. Like that communication and social interaction is actually really, really powerful. And I don't think we've even begun to harness that and what that means. You know, it's cool. I mean, it means that change could happen faster, which I think is really exciting.
Perhaps that's a bit of that activism. What you're talking about here within employees within their own companies, actually pushing their leaders to take a stronger stand on some of these areas.
Yeah.
Just a forewarning, we're going to be looking for some questions for you all, so please, those little pieces of paper and those little golf pencils, start readying them and write some questions, and we'll go to the audience here fairly shortly. Really going to shift gears here, because you've got something so cool and kind of quirky going on, and that is the Patagonia Worn Wear Tour. And it's, yes, all right, a silent yell I heard from the front row here with respect to Patagonia Worn Wear. Tell us, Rose, what is that? What is the Worn Wear Tour? It's here at Berkeley, by the way. What is it,
so
and
cool.
what do you intend to do through Worn Wear?
So Worn Wear started as Lauren Malloy's blog, where people were sending her these, you know, like photos of their old Patagonia gear that they'd had for 20 and 25 years. And they were just like really cool pictures. We started looking at that, and it was kind of amazing. And, you know, we started thinking about just the lasting nature of the product and how it's really built to last. And we did a lot of research to see sort of what's the most environmentally friendly thing, the most impactful thing you can do as an individual person who purchases clothing. And we looked at all the LCAs and all the analysis, and what it showed was the most important thing you can do. Yeah,
LCAs.
sorry. The most important thing you can do is keep your stuff longer. Keep it in use. Repair it when it's broken, and not buy a bunch of new stuff you don't need. So that's kind of, and we have always been repairing clothing in our Reno distribution center. We never really talked about it, but we had always been doing it. So if somebody's stuff got broken, we'd fix it. So we just decided to like make that a sort of educational tour, so that people would understand and we could have the conversation and build the relationship with our customer to know we want to build stuff that lasts a long time. We want to repair it when it's broken. And we also want you to know that your part of this relationship is you should keep your stuff in use as long as you can, or find a second home for it. And so we're doing the tour, and this year we're going to launch an online site called wornwear.com. Nellie Cohen, who's leading it, is right there. Yeah, so I'm stoked about it, because it's like a way for us to, you know, continue this conversation about consumption and about, you know, people having a different relationship to their stuff.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question that all the MBAs are asking. Doesn't that hurt your profits? You're not selling more stuff. You keep repairing it. Why would you do that?
It has not hurt our profits. It hasn't. I mean, I think most people can kind of look at the situation. Okay, if you take away all the corporate noise and the advertising and all that stuff, and think, you know, we're not going to have this unlimited amount of resources forever. This is just not how things are going to be. So we might as well start thinking about it now, and thinking about what kind of new markets there are, and different ways to interact with people and stuff. And so I think this is hopefully going to lead a conversation around that. And I think other brands will think about what it means to kind of re-commerce, is sort of the terminology. So
that's one thing that Patagonia is doing that's specific. Another thing that's kind of unique is this thing, Tin Shed Ventures. First off, why the name Tin Shed Ventures, and what is that, and what are you doing with that initiative?
Yeah, well, the name is named after it's this building called the Tin Shed in our offices in Ventura. It's where Yvon still actually has his forge in there, his blacksmith forge, and actually still works out there sometimes. So and that was sort of his first entrepreneurial venture, right? He started making pitons and blacksmithing, so it seemed like a good name. And Phil Graves thought it up, and
Phil's on our board of the Center for Responsible Business.
And and the idea behind it was this whole idea of trying to break up this paradigm around capital being, because I had worked in the private equity world, and a lot of people call themselves like social capital, but they're not really social capital because they still want to cash out in 5 years, and they still want all the stuff that they they normally would get. Mm-hmm. So we just decided to do it differently, have these longer time frames of which we'd invest in different kind of structures. And also, to really green the supply chain, you have to invest in infrastructure. When Yvon and Melinda started doing organic cotton, there really wasn't an organic cotton market even. So, you had to build the market. And you have to build the infrastructure. And so we also use the fund for that as well. And we use it, to work on renewables and other issues that we think are really important. But it's basically to fund the next generation Patagonia-like companies that are balancing environmental issues and also business and, looking for solutions through their business. So we've got some pretty interesting investments from a bison ranch in North Dakota that's restoring the grasslands there to, Berkeley-Haas, a company that makes skateboard decks and things out of recycled, fish nets that are destroying the reefs if they stay in the ocean. So, they're just things like that. And all that works together really well also with our environmental giving. So we're kind of well connected with all those communities, and we tend to hear about stuff from our network and from our tribe. So that works really well.
Well, another area that you're in that I'd like to ask you a question about here, and this relates to food, and a co-sponsor for today's event is the Berkeley Food Institute. And I just want to say with the Berkeley Food Institute, and particularly with the College of Natural Resources for convening this event, is we're so grateful. And part of this is hopefully to blur the lines between what goes on in the business school and business community and out there in the rest of the world. And that's one of our hopes here. And food, I think, is such a great example of a topic where it makes no sense for those of us within the business community to only be talking with those of us within the business community. So could you tell us here, Patagonia recently became a food company with Patagonia Provisions. Mm-hmm. And tell us a bit about this and why it came to be. You're an apparel company, right? So food, what's going on here? What are you trying to achieve with Patagonia Provisions?
Yvon has always had a tremendous interest in food. And, he's traveled all over the world. He's seen so many different kinds of agriculture. He's fished all over the world. And he has a real connection with food and how it's made. And we started, talking about what that would mean and in terms of, Patagonia entering into that market, because for us, he felt really strongly that the next real revolution, environmental revolution, was going to be in agriculture. Because we're seeing this, we all know our food system, right? It's like conventional agriculture is terrible for the planet. These synthetic fertilizers, these poisons that they, put on every crop, this monoculture, which is terrible for biodiversity. It's what's killing the bees. It's what's, I mean, there's so many things wrong with monoculture and conventional agriculture that I feel like Yvon felt like if we could do exactly what we've done in some respects with apparel supply chain in terms of really making changes, making investments, proving the model, that could be quite powerful, including leading certifications and things like that. So we decided to go for it and do it, and I think that it's probably one of the smartest things we've done, because I really believe the more I've learned about it myself personally, I mean, if we don't do it, if we don't help lead the revolution, I think, I'm hearing things like we have 20 years of topsoil left or 25 years of topsoil left. I mean, we have such degraded soils. And, we just keep doing the wrong thing, and we keep subsidizing the wrong thing. All the bad actors get subsidies, It's like fossil fuels and conventional, I mean, those guys get subsidies. I don't get any subsidies, and I'm running a profitable company. You know what I mean? And it drives me crazy, but I think that, we have to start subsidizing the things that are good for people and are good for the planet, and stop just subsidizing these, monopolies of, corporate greed, basically,
Another area for activism is needed, indeed. And Rose, since 1985, 1% for the Planet has been running at Patagonia. Mm-hmm. And tell us a bit about 1% for the Planet and what you intend to achieve through that, and what you are achieving through that.
Yeah, well, the founders have always granted to grassroots environmentalism. In 1991, they officially formed 1% so that other people could join, with Greg Matthews, who started Blue Ribbon Flies. Thank you. And they wanted people to pay their earth tax, what they consider their earth tax. And so it's 1% of sales, and to fund activism. Sometimes we have activists that we funded come back and attack us. And I actually think that's kind of cool. Not when it's happening, because it sort of sucks, but I think it's cool, Because they help keep us honest. They're part of the whole ecosystem, It's good. You shouldn't be afraid of being, of being challenged if you're a business, or hide from it, or, put your PR person out there, or whatever. It's like, we don't have time for that. Mm-hmm. And I think, so that movement has inspired a lot of other companies. I mean, Craig and Yvon are fly fishing friends, and they've, outdoorsmen, but they've inspired so many people globally. 1% for the Planet is growing. It's doing fantastic. It's international now, and consumers use it when they purchase. Mm-hmm. They're making a choice. So
I have a thick stack of questions
here.
Gosh. But before we move to these, before we move to the questions, Rose, if I could ask you to challenge the audience a bit. What is a call to action that you have for all of us here with you this evening?
Well, I don't think we have to engage in civil society. That's number one. You have to get up. If there's one thing I've learned from working with Yvon, it's their amazing persistence. 44 years of getting up every day and fighting the good fight and engaging in every way in civil society, in funding activism, in creating the very best product, and having obsessive, commitment to great quality and great product. We all have to engage in the world in whatever way that we can in the middle of what I think is a crisis. I think there's an environmental crisis. I think there's a crisis for a democracy right now. And you have to show up. And you know, Yvonne says this too, you know, to do good, you have to do something. You have to act. And, you know, we all have to act in whatever capacity that we have. If you're, you know, an artist, paint, if you're I mean, think of how, like, important comedians have become just in the last, like, 6 months, or artists, or, I mean, it's like everybody needs to be turned up, you know, on high, because if we sleepwalk through the next 3 decades, we are toast. We are toast. We can't do it. I mean, we have to take chances. We have to break down barriers. We have to act, I mean, in any capacity that we can. And, you know, I think there's a tremendous amount of power that is shared. And if I think there's one thing that I've seen in the last 6 months, it's that this idea that there's like a hierarchical leader leading things, it's over. It's gone. It's dead. You know, power is shared. It moves around from group to group, from place to place. You know, where it's needed, it emerges. It's really important to recognize you have a lot of power in whatever situation you're in, and you can have a lot of influence if you have the ability to sort of step up and lead and make yourself heard. So I would say that.
And Rose, it seems like the organizations that embrace that and encourage that are the kinds of places that I think most of us probably bring our whole selves to and get really fired up to get to work.
For sure. I mean, there's been no place that I've worked in my entire career. And, you know, I came from an immigrant family. You know, for me to even get to a C-suite of a technology company at 35 was like a huge deal in my family. And, you know, but that, you know, still that didn't feel good enough in a way, you know, like I didn't want to just cruise into the next 20 years of my life. I think that, you know, we have to sort of step up, you know, in a deeper way right now, because our circumstances demand it. And I think the world demands it right now. And if we're going to do what's right for our children and our children's children, I think we need to work harder, and we need to be more engaged with each other and solve these problems together.
Rose, thank you so very much.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone, please. And Dean, if I could also say the College of Natural Resources, as well as the Berkeley Food Institute, thank you so very much for allowing the Center for Responsible Business at Berkeley-Haas to play a role in this also. Thank you.
Well, you know, the right kind of collaboration and the right kind of growth, right? Yes. And I like the notion of what is organic growth, or what is, you know, I don't feel your company has tried to convince anyone they need tail fins on their cars, so Galbraith would be happy, I think, about your approach to this. Thank you both. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your skillful moderation and your ability to read very tiny handwriting.
Yes, indeed.
Which was exceptional. We have a very small gift to thank you. Just to say, we've been working very hard since 2015, moving forward an agenda to say, what is the future of universities in dealing with park issues, especially expanding beyond the traditional, how do we, in a kind of Starker Leopold sense, reintroduce species, manage to try and reconnect wires that have been severed in the Aldo Leopold model of the dynamics of parks, but moving beyond that to sort of question what kind of parks for whom, what's the research agenda that we need for the next generation of kind of park researchers that involves, you know, collaborations of public health, of law, of city and regional planning, so that we really get at that, okay, we've done pretty good on this, but what kind of parks and for who that's really embracing all Americans and looking beyond our borders. So we had a great Science for Parks, Parks for Science Summit where we had E.O. Wilson at the Albright lecture give the keynote address, and the Sally Jewell came as kind of our featured speaker, along with the president of the UC and Doug Brinkley, the historian at the Albright that year. And so we've just gotten all of the papers saying, what's the next century of parks look like? And we'd like to have a copy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dean. I will really treasure it.
So, thanks to all you. That was great questions. It was really fun. The hardest part in dealing with the questions is sorting out, because a lot of them are duplicates. The range of thought here was such that you got a very thick stack, because we didn't have to weed many out as being duplicate questions. So good job handling that. We have a reception immediately after. If you just go out these doors and out into the courtyard, join us out there, and thank you for coming.